Hello and welcome back to Trans Voices in Conversation, the podcast where we give insight into the lives and careers of some of the many talented creatives we at TVC have had the pleasure of working with. My name is Misia Butler. I am an actor, writer and producer with TVC, and I will be your host for the series. So today I am lucky enough to be joined by Kate and Krishna. Thank you so much both for coming on the podcast. I always like to start the podcast with giving you both some space to introduce yourselves, talk about your pronouns, what you do, and all that jazz. So Kate, would you like to go first?
Yeah, hi, my pronouns, I'm Kate O'Donnell, and my pronouns are she, her. And where am I up to? Well, we're in lockdown. I'm currently up a hill in Yorkshire, where I ended up in a pigsty. That's where I ended up in lockdown. It's a very nice pigsty on a farm. And I'm currently working on our Trans Arts Festival, TransVegas, so I'm the artistic director of that. And I'm also a performer and a writer. And weirdly, I've just got offered a part in a play that's going to happen during lockdown online. Oh, wow. So strange things happen, don't they, during lockdown. I thought my life was over and all theatres were going to close, and it was, I was burying my head in misery. And look at me now on a podcast with you lot.
And in a play. Exciting. And Krishna?
Hi, I'm Krishna. I use all pronouns. What am I doing? I'm in lockdown in Melbourne, where I got stuck because I was here for a gig, and then all the flights stopped going out of the country, so now I'm just here for months and months on end. It's wild, really. What do? I do all sorts of stuff: writing, performing, performance art, comedy, stand-up, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Quite a broad spectrum. Can't explain.
No, I mean it's great, and I think both of you have work that spans over actually quite a few genres and mediums. Do you either of you find yourselves instinctively drawn to a certain kind of medium or genre, or is there one that you feel most comfortable in creating or performing in?
I think for me, during this lockdown, going into digital is it's been a real mixed bag. Actually, I've written I wrote a radio play last year, and I've done some podcast stuff, but really kind of moving heavily into that. And I've realized actually my default is probably jumping on stage, which I've done since I was little. I went to an all boys school, and I used to play all the girl parts in all the school plays, including the Virgin Mary. Thanks very much. So I made the most of being. The boys just were like, they took a step back when they were doing the casting, and I took a step forward. And so I think that's my familiar medium. But I think more recently I've also been doing directing on stage, and did some film work. I've done some film and bits of television and stuff. I like to not call myself one thing. And I've done a musical. I just did a musical before lockdown as well. I did my first ever musical. So I think if you don't narrow yourself down, it's something quite, I don't know if it's a trans thing or a queer thing, where you don't have to turn yourself into one. You don't have to pick one. If I pick one, like gender and fluidity.
Yeah. Fair enough. That's true. Do you have any thoughts on
that? What am I drawn to? I think I'm drawn to live stuff. So like Kate, I don't necessarily enjoy video or recorded stuff. I mean, live stuff is recorded for I guess keeping archival, but apart from that, I don't necessarily enjoy creating video content. So I'm definitely drawn to the live, and I'm definitely drawn to text and comedy and things that are funny. But apart from that, I think, like Kate, I sort of like doing loads of different stuff, and I experiment. And I think the thing that's mostly constant with all the work that I do is that there's some level of research in it. I really love finding whether it's like intellectual stuff or form-based stuff. I really like researching things before they become a life
Turning
thing.
that sort of intellect into art and something that people can absorb in that way. I think that's pretty beautiful. And both of you create something quite beautiful with representing your community in a lot of your work as well, through just different ways of showing your identities. Do you think that activism and representation and diversity in that way, in an activist way, is something quite integral to performance art?
Do you want to go?
No, you go. You look like you were bursting.
I mean, I think there's like loads of different thoughts about that, where one, I think, yes, there's some sort of responsibility to represent a community in the performance context, because there's lesser people doing specific sorts of thing, which might not be for lack of talent, but mostly is due to like institutional gatekeeping and funding and resources and training and stuff like that. So in that context, I feel like the people that do make work have a lot of pressure on them to have to get everything right and to represent way more people than they can represent, because that's the only representation we have then. But in the flip side to it, I wish that none of us had to have that responsibility, and that we didn't have to represent our identity all the time.
I think that's following on from that. Definitely, I agree. And I think quite early on, I was hosting Trans Pride in Brighton, and I was getting anxious about how things were landing, because it was a Trans Pride event, and I was just doing my thing and singing a song and being silly a bit, and I was getting some live feedback during the event, you know, that it wasn't landing. And I spoke to somebody who's a trans, you know, person, and they were just like, you only have to represent yourself. And I went back on and had a great time, and I've kind of hung on to that. But I think also within representing myself, I think my last couple of shows have been kind of also explaining. And I definitely made my last show, You've Changed, to never have to answer those questions again. I felt like I'm going to lay it out. And actually, I did find that the questions after that show were better. I feel like over the years, the questions people ask have got better and a bit more informed. But I think the thing that I do is to not feel that pressure, or I deliberately did. I felt this. It's true what Krishna was saying about you, because so few people get to the stage, you do feel this weight of responsibility. And again, I felt like there was some backlash with Trans Creative that, it was the Kate O'Donnell show. And I was like, right, okay, so I now have to be all things, like it can't be about me then. So I started to develop TransVegas, which is a trans arts festival that has probably platformed 300 trans artists over the last 3 years, and even digitally this year we're doing over 35. So there's a real, and that just it kind of helps me relax. And I don't often perform, I don't have a big role to play in that. I might host a little bit or do something, but I tend to step out and see what happens in that. So I feel quite blessed that I kind of took what was coming at me, criticism or this need, or I really feel like we need to create a space that nurtures new talent. Because me and Krishna were just saying that sometimes you get to see the same people, and that's because of what Krishna was just saying about that they're the people that are lucky enough to work out the funding system or get the breaks. But where's the new people? So we have open mic nights, which are just the best thing. Just put a mic on a stage and see what happens with the trans community. And you literally could not program those nights. If you had all the money and all the time, it goes from like contemporary dance, lip syncing, spoken word, rock. Like I just sit back and really enjoy that. And so that's I think it's about developing yourself as an artist and not being frightened to develop your voice. What I really love as well, a lot of the people who we work with, they don't mention being trans. That feels like the massive change. Trans artists are not talking about being trans.
Yeah, just representing.
And they're also making, and they're making more comedy. Yeah. So there's more fun. There's less. We're talking to our audience, and we've got a shortcut and a language.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Kind of moving into what Krishna was talking about, that kind of hope that we don't need to necessarily always talk about one facet of identities, just the whole thing as a wider thing. And you've been mentioning Trans Creative and TransVegas a bit. Could you tell us a bit more about how Trans Creative came about and how you both got involved in it?
Krishna's been involved in all of them, I think. I think Krishna was in our original one where they came and worked with Hot Pencil Press, and you did There Is No Word for It. So we did. We're very keen, I think, right from the off to. I think the trans arts were quite trans feminine, not very representative in terms of diversity or colour and non-binary representation. So very quickly we just really looked for that work and encouraged that work, and it was there. It's there. That work is there. And I think we've developed that. So yeah, we started quite small, and I think last year we tripled our numbers, and we had a really brand new audience. And I think we're just still finding our feet a little bit. And I think this has been I think this will increase our numbers, the digital reach. I've got a feeling it will. But it's really taken on a life of its own, I think. And I've been inspired by other arts festivals that have gone before, like Hot Pencil Press. Serge from Hot Pencil Press used to run this brilliant festival called Transfabulous. So it's very much, it's called TransVegas, so you get a feeling it's not earnest. It's about, it could be a festival, I think. We could go to festivals. It has that, it's very discussion. And the main aim is to take over as many buildings in Manchester that don't normally house trans work. So we kind of go and trans up buildings, and we end up in some quite swanky buildings. Because I love a down and dirty gig. Yeah, like the Royal Exchange. You know, we've worked with them, with the Royal Northern College of Music, Manchester City Art Gallery. We've done quite a few pieces with them. And I think I love a dirty, kind of down and dirty gig, but I felt like trans work can often live in those places. And I just thought, what would happen if we brought those gigs into those buildings? And I think we've managed to challenge those buildings to accommodate that audience. Because something really beautiful happened last year, that we kept going to these quite big gigs, and they were very vibrant and busy, and everyone was really relaxed. And we realised when you get trans performers performing to trans audience, there's nothing to debate, nobody's coming for you. We were just super chilled. I remember, Krishna, you talking about really enjoying doing your comedy to a trans audience.
Yeah, because I feel like often, especially with stand-up, the entire scene is very, it's very cis, it's very white, and you're going into that space, and all of my work is very trans, and you're in this space where you're doing stand-up comedy where the audience just doesn't understand you. So I've got to really dumb it down, and I have to like prepare myself for the worst audiences every time. But then every time I do TransVegas or like a trans audience, it's the nuance that could come out of my work can happen in that space, because I'm not trying to explain things, and it's just like a completely different experience as a performer and as a creator for making work for that audience.
And you did your first comedy gig at TransVegas.
I did, yeah. I tried stand-up for the first time at a TransVegas
How was that?
gig, that's right.
How did it go?
It was good. Terrifying. But I'd been performing for years. I knew the language of it, but it's a different structure, and it's very... With the other stuff, even though it's comedy, I don't expect the audience to laugh, so there's less pressure. But the minute you tell people it's stand-up, they're like, all right, then make me laugh. So you have to sort of provide that. So it was terrifying, but also everyone was really nice, and I had a great experience. So I carried on making it.
Yeah, there's something like...
And we were gonna...
No, sorry, go on.
We were gonna have Krishna's new show Beast at the festival, but unfortunately we couldn't. So we've managed to get you in a different way.
Coronavirus, that's why.
Hashtag coronavirus ruining everything.
There's something I've always wondered about with things like stand-up comedy, and I think this kind of falls into what you were talking about. How much, obviously you're presenting yourself as yourself in a lot of stand-up comedy. How much do you find yourself sort of embellishing and inventing, or how much is just genuine comedy of life?
I think it depends on what sort of comedian you are, but I think for me I had a lot of material that's not often tapped into because there's not that many trans stand-up comedians. So I could make jokes that you might not have seen before just from everyday stuff that we have in our lives. But I mean, at the same time, you have to embellish it, and you have to find the punchline, because comedy is exaggerated and comedy is opposite. So there will be edits to my actual experiences, but often it's true.
Yeah, I just think it's amazing to kind of, as you say, but put yourself into that position where you're taking your life and telling people it's funny, and then actually getting them to laugh. It sounds terrifying to me, but it's an amazing medium.
I think when I've done my writing for my shows, I think I am a frustrated stand-up comedian because my default, because there's something about laughter, it feels like you connect with the audience, you know they're there, you know they're with you, and most of the stuff I like to do is comedy. And so I just kind of took apart some of You've Changed and turned it into a 15-minute stand-up comedy set, because some bits I don't know, I really love comedy, and I like going to it, I like seeing it done, and it's a really vibrant thing, and I like although I like doing big shows, there's something about just being able to walk on stage with a mic is something quite liberating as well, and less fussy, because my shows can be quite big. Like, I have choirs on stage with me, and I have massive sets and dance routines and costumes, endless costumes and wigs and quick costume changes, and there's something lovely about, I do like that side of comedy. It's a bit down and dirty, and
and I think also it's definitely,
just words.
and I think there's something about also from a marginalized group, seeing comedy move into something that's not at the expense of those marginalized groups, and seeing someone on stage who can trust not to make those jokes, you know.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, because even when I'm in a queer context, and even with the show that Kate was talking about, Beast, which is a full-length, essentially a stand-up show, and often queer and trans audiences come to it, but I have to work really hard to get them to trust me. So unless they're my friends, I can see them like sort of shift in their seats, and it basically takes half the show to win them over. Because I think, I mean, if it was me, I would be the same, because you're sort of waiting for someone to fuck up, to say something wrong, to say, you can't imagine how someone would be making jokes that aren't like at the expense of your identity. So it is, I think stand-up comedy's fucked us over, because we now think that every comedian is shit, which often they are, and they are transphobic and racist and homophobic and everything
but
else. But there's also heaps of queer and trans and amazing comedians that come out
that need to be put into the spotlight more. And I think it's an amazing thing having things like TransVegas and stuff that can put a spotlight on those people and make that move to flooding the industry with that.
And in the north of England as well, I think it was quite deliberate to have it in the north of England. I think in the south there is a bit of space and a culture and some nights like Bar Whatever, which are brilliant, and you know, the Marlborough, and I feel like there is this more healthy you kind of almost expect it to be in the south. But I always joke that, you know, when I originally thought of putting on a trans arts festival in the north of England, I wasn't sure how that was going to go down, really. You know, I thought as a business plan, you would probably find that quite hard to fund, but it's a bit like build it and they will come, you know. And I do really want it to become like a destination that people go, great, TransVegas is on this weekend, and just get on that train and travel to, you know, around the country to get there, because it's a really good vibe, and it's got more festively. Sadly, this year we were going to take to the streets and have a rally and a march.
Wow.
So this was our first year, and sadly, and we got some international artists coming over as well. And it was going to be, we were going to sit back, book the artists, and I was told that, because last year I did a piece called 100 Trans Voices. I don't know why I did that. Somebody just said, I decided to try and get 100 trans voices in the Royal Exchange, so, you know, and so we recorded voices. We got 30 members of the community to come in and share their stories as they were walking in to the audience. We got about 15 artists on stage. They all came and joined us at the end. it was really beautiful. But my producer went, can we not just have one day where one artist just walks on stage and we just book them and get them a nice dressing room, and I was like, oh, okay,
fine.
So I think, but of course, and then the rally was going to be this place where there was a march and a rally. So there's a real sadness, but we are going to try and do one online. And if people are interested, there's some stuff on transcreative.uk. That's all our social media to kind of get involved in that. But yeah, I think being in the north, it feels really important. I mean, one of the pieces we've done this year is called Trans Up North.
Oh yeah.
And it's deliberately northern trans artists to really centre. And then we've also looked at older trans artists as well. And some of it is a response to the pandemic, that how older people have been represented and treated. And I was like, wow, it must be really depressing to be old at the minute, to just see yourself not cared for and not valued. So we contacted some trans legends, older trans legends, and they're interviewed by younger people.
It's amazing.
Krishna is one of the younger interviewers. I'm one of the younger interviewers, even though I'm 55. I'm interviewing somebody who's 86.
Oh, wow.
So I'm interviewing April Ashley. So I'm going to be interviewing April Ashley, and then we've got Campbell X and Melts who are also having an interview, and there might be some others yet. But I think that could go on. Those conversations, I don't know how your conversation went, Krishna. I've not seen it yet, but they're a nice format.
It went really good. It's great.
Yeah, it's great to see that sort of intergenerational conversation between trans people as well. That kind of feeling that there is, that we do have a history, and that we do have kind of a culture that spans further than 20 years ago, or even 50 years ago. There's so much there to be tapped. And you were talking about being in the north and stuff, and how that's sort of made waves for it. Do you think that in terms of your demographic, do you think it's primarily still quite queer audiences, or do you bring in a lot of kind of cis-het audiences as well?
I don't think we've managed that yet. I think the digital thing, I'm very interested. We are quite keen to get a broader audience this year, and I think that is important. I make trans work for trans people ultimately, but I make it so it's good and fabulous, and it's there. And I do think it's a gift to Manchester. And this year, Manchester City Council did put some money in, so that's taken 3 years. And Manchester Pride also were going to support the rally and the march. So I feel like we're becoming more credible within the city, and I think it's a real asset to the city. It's like a gift. I feel like it's a gift, and everyone should be enjoying it. The way we have all sorts of events in Manchester. It's every kind of weekend there's some kind of festival or event, and you have to keep it quite real in Manchester though. So sometimes the titles are like, I think I always try and sell it that it's like northern and come and meet them, and we do get cis queer mixed bag, but I'd still say it's mainly trans, and I'm okay with that. I feel like we've got such a lack of it that, but I think it's primarily a queer trans space, but I think people who make their way into it have an amazing time, and they come back, because they've never seen that work. No matter how unpolished it is, they've not seen it. I think whether or not you're kind of cis or trans or anywhere on the queer spectrum, seeing that amount of queer art to that level is unprecedented, I think, and that's amazing. And seeing that diversity of kind of queer art as well. Do you find yourself sort of how do you find the different acts that you do find? Because I think that's obviously is such an integral part of it. It's quite a small world. In some ways it's quite a small world, and if you avoid the people you see a lot and look a little bit deeper, then they're there. You have to kind of get out and about. I get out and about a lot, and I talk to people, I ask for recommendations, and I think as well next year, I think I might step aside to have somebody else be the artistic director. And it was kind of more the plan for this year, but because of what happened, it just didn't work out. We didn't find the right person. But I think who you put in charge can bring in different people. So I think next year, if we had somebody non-binary or a trans person of colour or younger, I think it would be a very different show, very different TransVegas, and that's fine. And I think it could be. I'm kind of ready for that. I'm really excited by that, not being just so I can have a break, just turn up.
Yeah, and have things sort of develop.
Also, I'm a bit, after 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I think after 3 or 4 years, I've kind of done my people a bit, and I don't want it to become the same people. So, yeah,
opening it up like that is great. And in terms of wider, across mediums, do you have any ideas about what some of the key steps that we need to be focusing on to improve that diversity over many different marginalised groups in the arts and performance art, or to be fair, not even just performance art, if you have any insight into kind of any of the visual arts? Is there anything that comes to mind that you go, this is something I've been thinking about, this is something that needs to change?
I mean, I feel like there needs to be institutional change for it to actually make a proper difference across the industry, whether it's acting or writing or performing or creating. I feel like, because I'm sure both of you have these conversations, and I've heard, Harry, you have this conversation where we need diversity in casting, but I feel like that diversity in casting can only happen if we have diverse roles written, and diverse casting directors and diverse directors and diverse funders, and so it's sort of a domino effect. And I feel like the main thing that I think about is who's at the top, who's making the decisions, why are they there. And in fact, unlike Kate, they stay there for years and years, 40 odd years, 50 odd years, and it's the same stuff that gets produced and the same people that get cast. So I feel like that's the top thing for me, is that people have to make change within those institutions, in the systems that exist, for it to trickle down to our level as performers and creators.
Yeah, I think it's really frustrating, and I think that's probably why I make my own work and I make my own festival, and I don't want to be waiting around for... I mean, I do go for auditions, and well, I mean, now might be a good time to chat about what we're up to, Krishna.
Yeah.
I mean, we are writing something together at the minute, which is an idea that I kind of had a while ago. But me and Krishna have always wanted to write. We've talked about it for ages, and actually, the lockdown did mean we've had a chance to, get down to do some work and do some writing. And I think it's a real response to, rather than waiting around for those parts to come, because they're never quite right anyway, and then a cis person's going to get the part anyway, so no matter how excited you get, you'd always have to get through that. And if it's a trans part, sometimes it can be a bit vanilla, very one-dimensional, boring. Oh yeah, boring, sad. It's never fun, never nuanced, funny, never nuanced. Like trans person on their own having a really hard time, gonna die, drug addicts, it's gonna be terrible. And then there's never much hope. If I was looking at, or it's mainly written by cisgendered white men, and it's very frustrating that they will not step down for 1 minute. They will not just sit down and let and go. So me and Krishna are writing a little something at the minute, and it's interesting, isn't it, when we're chatting about Krishna, we're on a little journey with it. It's about auditioning trans people. It centers trans people in this industry, in this business, and I think that's probably the only way we're going to get in, is for us to take a lead and cast trans people playing interesting, fun trans part led by us. And if we fall flat on our own face.
And also all the parts. Yeah. There's cis characters in it, but we want
everyone to be trans. Yeah. And just why not? Because that's nothing unusual in the outside world. So, and it'll be a comedy with a little bit of drama.
Yeah.
Imagine if you, me, and Krishna wrote a really heavy, dark,
angsty,
crime.
It just wouldn't happen. But also, I'm like, all the trans depictions we have, it is drama, like Butterfly, or it's always something that's quite tragic. What would happen if there's a sitcom with hilarious trans leads doing just silly, shitty stuff?
Introduce the
It's
world.
like we don't deserve to watch fun stuff.
Also, introduce the world to our world because it's so one-dimensional,
which is often funny
and vibrant and sexy and full of sadness and harsh, the harshness of reality and the joy and the community and the lack of community and the people pulling the ladder up when they get a break. Some people being lost in that. People putting up with crap parts because they feel like they should. If you speak up, you might feel like you might never work again. If, like me, for that musical, I'm sure we're going to write that scene in. You get a part in a West End show and then you have to leave it because the cisgendered man won't step down from playing a cis woman, so I have to leave and they get to stay. And I think ultimately the punchline is they kind of never get the part. It's like it's never theirs because it's so frustrating. And I think the idea is that all the transphobia and misery will happen around television, but their lives will be like ours, where it's light and shade. We are not tragic. As here, I don't feel like we're tragic. We have tragic
not
lives.
sharing our angst.
We are.
I mean, most lives have ups and downs, and like it's not that we don't get sad,
but the default is not
specific things.
Tragic.
No, default is to like sort of carry on with life and have a good
and especially
one.
I think with like, as you say, like so much of our representation is so angsty and tragedy driven that we needed escapism. I mean, I can't watch more angst, trans angst. I want to watch something where the person gets the romantic lead or the person gets sort of friends that support them, or just has fun and has a teen experience, or I don't know, whatever.
Casually in love. Casually has a relationship with their family. Casually steps out the door.
Casually is trans.
Do you know what I mean?
Casually is just trans,
Casually
but that's sort of
trans.
secondary. It's like just living.
Yeah, just trans. Like I was talking to somebody, who was it yesterday, and they were like, when their friends get a bit on, we were talking about kind of Black Lives Matter stuff, and they were relating it to their trans experience. They were like, when their friends thought they're doing them a favour by sending them all the trans stuff they find online and bombarding them, and they were like, at 6:00 I like to tell them I'm not trans anymore.
Sticking that break.
I like to take my trans coat off and just kick back and watch a bit of telly.
I think the allyship thing is a really interesting question, because I think we are going to have an ally episode on this podcast as well, but just talking about what allyship means and having that moment to be like, we appreciate that you are always sort of there to talk about and to support, but sometimes we need a switching off point. And do you have any kind of like ideas around allyship and how it can be improved within different communities?
I'm really interested in what's happening with, what's happening in America, and how I think it sometimes you feel like you're at the mercy of your allies rather than being able to slightly ask for what you need. And what I'm seeing is with the reaction to the riots is like black people saying, I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need this, I need you to go away and do some work. And I think that feels very powerful. And I think for me as a trans person to kind of relate that experience, I think in my last show, I was like, there's a song I sing where it goes, look it up, read a book, get on the net, just get out of my face and just you go and do the work. It's like, you don't want to be the information board. You don't want to be the person that has to solve it. It's not black people's job to sort racism. It's becoming very clear whose job it is to sort racism. I don't think black people have a problem with black people. I don't think trans people have any issues with trans people. We kind of can work out where the problem is. So I think sometimes marginalized communities get really exhausted And I like it when people pick up the baton and go and do that work for me. Go and challenge transphobia on my behalf, so I don't have to. Go and read a really smart book about trans theory and something really interesting, and you share that and get your friends reading it in their book clubs, you know, and so they don't see it as dull and earnest and what are we going to say? We might misgender them. You know, it's more vibrant and interesting and get on. I feel like they're missing out with our community.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know,
Just get on board. Yeah.
That's me. Get on board.
I mean, I think the main thing that allies have to do is listen. Like Kate was saying, it feels like right now Black people are saying this is what we need and white people are doing it, but this isn't the first time they've said it. They've been saying it for years and decades and centuries, but now people have decided to listen. So I think the first rule of allyship is listening. There's stuff out there that you know has to be done, and you can ask people. There are people that, like in performance, for example, you can find people that will help you solve your problems of whatever diversity or casting or whatever it is, but you're gonna have to be willing to pay them for their time and to listen to what they say. And I think that's one of the main problems I have with allyship especially in performance and the arts, is that there's people that often want to be allies to trans people making work or who are acting or writing, but they often do it so they look better. So they put out casting calls so that they seem like they're doing some sort of work, but they're never going to cast those people. Or they might pretend like they've put on one play with a trans person, and so they've solved the entire thing. But why is it that only one trans play can be on, but there's like 20 other cis white straight plays on at the same time constantly? So I think the sort of idea of allyship has to change, and people have to sort of work to get that identity. You can't just be like, I'm an ally, I do nothing. You've got to prove that you are, and then you can be an ally.
Yeah, have that kind of actions, not words. I mean, words are obviously important, but actually doing things and back it up with some actual evidence. Yeah, definitely. So, I mean,
like there's this yeah.
No, carry on.
I was just saying there's this whole, and I was told this, and I talk about this quite a bit, but this idea that people deselect from trans work or black work or women, you know, people deselect, and I think I used to think, oh yeah, I kind of get it, you know, some of my internalized transphobia, you know, like, oh, I get it, it's just a trans play, why should anybody come, you know, for a while I used to work really hard with marketing and do community, you know, like bust a gut, and I was like, no, actually, it's like that is a tiny tip of the iceberg. So if you're not going to come and see trans art, oh my God, you're not going to employ trans people, you're not going to house trans people, you're not going to sleep with trans people, you know, it's like the tip. So I kind of believe that art could reverse that tip of the, you know, more people should be going to see art, trans art, so we could start to unpack and disseminate all the other kind of ways that trans people are deselected. You know, how you deselect from trans experience, because it's very much like we're other, we're like the other. It's like, I'm cis, I'm default normal, in inverted commas, you're other, and we have to then accommodate you and place you, rather than going, I think you can tell a lot by society by how it treats its minorities. That's who you should be looking to bring in and escalate, you know, elevate and spotlight. Just look at your minorities, you know, look at your minorities. And I think I feel like it's quite a battle sometimes with theatres and creatives, because you do feel like you're constantly selling the idea of putting on a trans piece, putting on some trans work, getting some trans work. It's never, people have not knocked on my door once. No one told me to set up a trans arts festival in Manchester. Nobody. We are, and that's our brilliance, but it can be tiring. It'd be nice to go, hey, we're doing a whole season at the National, it's all trans work. We're sacking off all the white cisgendered men because, hey, they've been kind of having a good old time in there now. So we're going to do we're going to do a whole year. And that would change. All the people that go to see those shows would maybe stop deselecting, would maybe when they met a trans... Like, I've had people after they've seen some of my work who've worked with trans people start talking to them. They kind of almost didn't talk to them. I had an air steward friend, and there was somebody trans who was an air steward, and they kind of left her on her own. And after they saw my show, Stand By Your Trans t-shirt, all the rest of it, they thought, I've got to go in. You know, I know it's social change. Social change is going to happen, but minorities cannot be responsible for creating social change.
There's this strange like fear. I think there's the levels of kind of discrimination and prejudice that are inbuilt in privileged identities, and there's that fear of even you know, talking to or interacting with a marginalized group because of the idea that you would get it wrong, but it comes into that prejudice of never being exposed to any people like that, and also just assuming that is all about their identity, you know, that is all that there is to them. And so it's an interesting prejudice that's there. So I've kind of run out of questions here, but I was just wondering if you had any closing thoughts, anything that you didn't get to say, or anything else that you're working on that you wanted to plug, or any parting ideas that you want to leave our listeners with. You don't have to, but just a nice way to send things off.
What do I have to plug?
Because
Nothing, because COVID. I'm plugging this podcast.
Kate, do you have anything to say?
I mean, I think now is the time to be checking out trans artists of colour and black trans artists. I think we need to look to artists of colour to get some answers, because they are doing the work and they are working hard. I always think, you know, in terms of gigs, it's like trans people are always going to have less gigs. I always say you should pay them twice as much, you know. And I've seen people of colour who, when they're on panels, they check out how many people of colour are on the panel. If there's only one, they charge double, because they're like, well, I'm going to have to work twice as hard to represent, you know. And I feel like I'm an optimist, and I think you know, things will change. But in terms of plugging things, I mean, the festival, I mean, digital, it's in the middle of a pandemic. Again, it feels like another, in the middle of a pandemic, and when there's riots, it's like, I had to talk to some of our creatives yesterday because they were losing a bit of heart. Like, oh my God, there's so much going on in the world. Can I really make this silly piece about da-da-da? Or is it the right time to write this spoken word? And I was like, absolutely. You know, like, we all need a bit of reminding that trans, we have to use our visibility, and we have voices and we have opinions, you know, trans people, and I think I'm trying to encourage people to do that. But yeah, it's I'd like you to come and see it, because it's taken 120 Zooms. It's, you know, it's been a real challenge, and I think there's a lot of conversations happening in this. There's a lot of reflection and conversation, which is about people having time to sit back and reflect. So it's also got a lot of fun and a lot of performance, but we've just tried to, as we normally do, cram a lot of people in. So it's like a fast track into a little trans world that I think not many people get to see 35 trans artists in, you know, by clicking on your internet. So yeah.
That's amazing. You'll see me there. I can't wait.
Great.
And hopefully we'll see many of our listeners there. I mean, who knows how many listeners there are, but fingers crossed. All right then.
I think the other thing we're thinking of, like, doing a sharing of what me and Krishna are working on in Homotopia in November. So that's something
to plug. Keep your eyes or your ears peeled.
Months ahead. Who knows what the world will look like by November?
Put the seeds in.
Will there be a Homotopia? Will theatres exist? Will we exist? Who knows?
What will our hair be doing? What will our nails be doing?
The nail story, that's the next one. All right then, yeah.
No, but seriously,
Yeah.
if Zoom's collapse, nothing's gonna happen. Can you imagine if Zoom and Skype and everything just shut down?
Internet is our sort of lifeline at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's interesting times that we are in.
But our trans community are online. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of trans community, they don't go to theatre, they don't go to access those spaces.
Yeah.
So I think let's see what happens
Let's
with
spread
the
it.
festival being online.
Let's evolve.
You know,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, let's evolve. Let's transition.
Yeah. Is that the title of our episode? Who knows?
Let's transition.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for
so much.
having us.
And I'll leave it there.